with that, we'll call this meeting to order and roll call. Marcus, all present, if you like.
All present.
Thank you. We'll have a pledge of allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, approval of the agenda. Is there anything we need to add or anything we need to delete?
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ty, support Rick. No other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None, 3-0. Okay, public comment? Not forward.
Jim Kiesel, the undersheriff. There's probably nothing this committee could do. I'm just more making you aware. I had an employee come to me who's part of the union here in the building, and when they reorganized the contract and did the pay scales, we have an administrative secretary who does the vast majority of our work, who's full-time, 16 years of seniority, and then we have a part-time secretary who's been here 3 or 4 years. They make the same amount of money now with the reclassification of the pay scales. And that just seems not right and not fair. Obviously, that employee was a little put off. I mean, she does far more than the regular secretary. She's a full-time employee, senior employee, and for them to make the same pay now was obviously an oversight when the negotiations happened. She came to me with it, so I want to make sure you guys are aware. I realize there's not much you can do now. That contract is settled and it is what it is, but something that should probably be noted in the future.
Very well. Yes, thank you, Jim. I don't see any other public comment. So we can move on to the minutes of the February 9th, 2022 meeting.
They were distributed email.
Yep. I
Move to approve the minutes as received.
Second.
Okay. Moved and supported, Ty and Rick. No other questions about them? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, 3-0. Okay, fiscal year 2021 audit update.
Yeah, I thought it'd be helpful for Jen just to give a brief overview where we are. Obviously, you'll get the full report in June, but this has been a priority and Jen's been working hard with her team on it, so. Let's just take a few minutes, give us an
Sure.
update.
Yep, the auditors were on site last week on Wednesday and Thursday. All of our prep work was completed. What still needs to happen is the information sheets that get filled out from the treasurer, as well as the finance and clerk working together to get those finished up for 2021. So there's some questionnaires we get regarding COVID and procedure changes and stuff like that. And so then once all that is done, it's basically sent all to them, and then that's the completion on the paperwork side.
Okay. And when do you expect that to be all completed?
I'm hoping, I leave for vacation on Saturday, so I'm hoping that this week I can get with John and get those all finalized and sent over.
Okay.
Are we anticipating a fine audit? Any issues that you predict?
There were a few things while they were on site that we've discussed. I don't have anything in print, but I can tell you, do you want to speak, John, or? Okay. There will be your normal finding of not having a CPA, and then within that, a couple of things that came to our attention is the bond refunding, so entries on our side that were posted that hadn't happened, so the auditors have to do that. There was a little bit of questions on bank rec, and then another receivable liability paid out, had some errors in that. So I'll be working with the treasurer. On the clerk side, there was nothing that needs to be clarified, but John and I will work towards getting that so that when that final is done and for June, that those answers are there and the procedures that'll take place to eliminate findings in the future.
So no big issues, no findings?
I mean, your grade's not gonna be an A, be my guess. If I was gonna grade it, I'd grade it an A minus. There were things that, the finance director will most likely be in charge of, for the future. And, after my vacation, I'll be meeting with the clerk and the treasurer and the administrator to iron all this out, to figure out and to let them know. We've met with Peacock once before as a team, so I will meet with them and we'll go over what I learned, about the finance director position, and then report to them on how we're going to implement this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on audit?
Nope, that should be it.
Okay, now reserve revenue funds.
Yeah, as you know, during our ARPA meetings, questions brought up, where are we financially in terms of funds available through the county, whether through the treasurer's office or through the county's funds. So I think John's going to go first.
Most of this here I have in your packet, I just wanted to blow up the graph
So you can actually read the numbers now versus a small print.
Thank you.
and give you guys your policy to review. Thank you. I drew a question as to the agenda topic reserves. And out of clarification, I did some digging and found that I think the administrator is looking at the reserves policy. And reviewing that, the first thing that we have on there is the budget stabilization fund. That is basically your emergency fund that we cannot utilize unless there's natural disaster, lack of collection. It's the go-to to continue providing basic and essential services through the county. The board policy currently says that we should have 15% of the prior year's general fund budget in that fund. And if you look in your packet, I provided a trial balance and also a snapshot of the budget. The trial balance shows that we have $1.2 million in there. And based on either Jen's numbers, which she's in charge of the budget, so if it's $10 million, we should have 1.5, or if we look at the total revenues and expenditures, I calculated that we should have about 2.2. I just want to bring this to light that our budget stabilization fund is underfunded and that we should probably address that.
John?
Yeah.
Or either John or Jen.
Yeah,
says it.
it's okay.
Can you go back over, you said that if you thought it should be 1.5 based on what?
If you look in your packet, Jen has some documentation showing the general fund budget is $10 million.
No, revenues.
Revenues, excuse me.
That's just your revenues.
So is it
Okay.
fair to say that this 14 million,
You're approved and expended, you expended 13.9.
13.9?
Yeah, if you take into consideration, I think you'd have to speak between, I know the finance says here, it's the clerk and treasurer. So what you'd want to look at is your 250 to MERS actually part of this? You know, your transfer outs, do those actually equate, and your contingency? So that's kind of how we said we're not as far off as the 1 point as we
Okay,
would
that's where I
be.
was.
Right.
Well, the
Correct.
contingency is separate in this as 3%.
Right, so it's saying here that you need it wants 15% of the reserve fund of the general fund budget.
Mhm.
So, or an average of the last 5 years' general fund budgets. So if you, depending on how you wanted to look at it, if you want to look at it as a 100% of all year-to-date expenses, yes, that's 13.9. And so you take your percentage from there. If you take out the fact that your budget is 15 million, but you didn't use contingency, which is 447,000, you know, the things that you didn't, they're kind of like your safety net, then that would be an adjustable number is how I would look at it. But that doesn't mean that's what everybody else would
But
do.
we can agree that it could be
Yes,
increased.
this fund since 1990 has never equaled, correct?
So,
It's
Just a-
never equaled 15%?
It's never equaled 15%.
Oh,
no.
okay. So it's
so
not
how
like
we
we're-
come to that is up for discussion. I just wanted to point it out. So that's what the trial balance is for, and the document that's got a heading approved, amended, audited.
Let me ask a question just on that topic, if it's okay.
Yes.
So, I know our policy says, if it's been this way since 19, what, you said 90, or
Yeah, this is the
Yeah, this
O2
is adopted in
policy.
1990. Mhm.
is that 15%, should that be adjusted downwards?
We revised it for you.
Yeah, revised in 14 with John.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking, because obviously we have a policy that we haven't followed. You're saying we've been underfunded for all these years, it has an impact on our budget for
It
operations.
doesn't impact the budget, it's just the, what
It's just
if,
a number that's in our policy?
what if factor, you know?
Yeah,
and
it's just a,
whatever this body's or,
Yeah.
you know, the board's comfortable with as far as, having a reserve that we can maintain the level of service. So, in that $1.2 million, Jen can equate that to 1.5 months of operations. If we wanted to have 2 months of operations, whatever that number is,
so you're saying that really is an internal decision made
It is
by
an internal
the board?
decision,
There's no
yes.
state mandate?
This number is the number that's represented on mine where it says, where he's saying the 10 million for.
Yeah.
If you had no tax revenue,
Right,
this is
yeah.
the only way that you would be able to function as a government until that ran out.
So at
That's
some
what
point,
this
we have a
is.
discussion whether we want to increase the
And
amount
that's-
or change policy, right?
correct.
Well, or also, all right, this is by county ordinance 9002. So by ordinance, does policy override an ordinance? Or should we change that ordinance and just have it be a policy?
That's a legal question, I think.
Yeah, it might be, because it seems like I remember this discussion, because I kind of remember at one point, and as they said, it like 20%. And you're like, that was a little bit high. I remember, and that was maybe our auditor at the time, right, had recommended 20%. So, okay, yes, Ty, did you have a question?
In the school business, auditors recommend a certain percentage. Have our auditors,
I've never
Okay.
asked, no, and this
And-
isn't something that's on their threshold unless we specifically asked,
Yeah.
which we could.
or find out if there's any guidance?
Because you do have to have a board resolution when you when you expend this. So you basically have to have a disaster that you meet to state that your tax revenues did not come in. Your delinquent would have to be almost all gone for you to touch this. I mean, to
Well,
the threshold.
Delinquent can't be used for operations.
It's correct, it can't come in to facilitate whole departments, but it can facilitate some of yours.
Yes.
Correct, yes.
It sounds like if we go down to the bottom of the page and it says any 1 year, we can only use a third of that. So that really doesn't if we follow the policy, that doesn't give us much
No.
safety net.
And I apologize for derailing the topic. I just wanted this to be a,
No, this is good. No, John, don't apologize. This is good. If we should look at this policy, we should look at this policy, and maybe it needs to be brought up to date, or have clearer language of what we're going to base it on. Are we going to base it on before MERS, after MERS, spent, collected, whatever?
Would it make sense that in a future meeting, the two of you come up, I mean, you two are the experts on this. You're telling us there's no state mandate, it's not an accounting
It does, I believe, that Michelle just pointed out, there probably is a state mandate of what you should have in reserve
I
funds.
think it
If you guys could
was-
review
For
that.
budget
that's the
stabilization.
next meeting on that.
Nothing critical
Yeah.
right now, obviously, and we're in March, but
Yeah, I mean, it's been that way for 30 years,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
not an issue, but we should either
Okay.
revise the policy or abide by it, or modify the
And find
policy
out if
to
we did
fit
it by-
current practices.
ordinance, if we should take that off or
Okay.
whatever. So,
So if you took a
Okay.
look at the options, come back in our next
I
meeting.
We'll give you an update.
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. Okay?
I just moving through the rest of this policy is basically the function of the finance director. As far as contingency is concerned, through the budget appropriations. The equipment replacement fund, again, would be finance. I don't know if you wanted to have any comments.
On which ones?
Contingency or the equipment replacement funds.
Oh, the 3%?
Mhm.
Yep, so this year we're over the 3%.
Yep.
You have the sheriff's vote in there.
Yep.
Equipment replacement funds is your, motor pool, which we'll be looking at, during your budget this year. Because what we're charging the sheriff's patrol vehicles aren't now fulfilling their replacement values.
And then the general fund balance, the unreserved cash level of the fund balance, that's maintained by both Jen and I, just making sure that we have enough for operations, and then we do that on a regular basis. Earmarked reserves are not something that we or I've been involved in. So we get down to the delinquent tax revolving fund. In this policy, we worked it out, and I can't remember the year that we did this. 2015, 17, somewhere in there, that corporate counsel and the board of commissioners worked with me to establish a policy that we can adhere to. And so I've developed or put together a look back on the DTR and fund balance on these graphs. Basically just demonstrating year-end balances for the cash and investments, the fund balance, and the revenue, with the moving average over the fund balance. As you can see, the last 5 years, we've been fairly consistent. No big peaks or troughs, and that's really what we should focus in on. You can see in 2008 and 9, we drew that down to build this building, and subsequently have built it back up over the years. Revenue is tied directly to the delinquent taxes. So the higher amount of delinquency there is, the more interest and admin fees that I earn in that fund. So there has been basically no change in that. And that goes into our next page, the DTR settlement versus year-end cash.
So John, before you move up,
Yep.
before you move off of your front page there, we did have higher revenues back in those years.
A higher delinquency rate, I mean, we had basically the crash of 08.
Is that, okay, that was
Yeah.
where I was gonna go with that.
So
It was
we-
still catching up.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's what I was gonna demonstrate in
Oh, okay.
the
Moving
next
on.
page there.
Okay.
No, it's fine. You'll see that this is the cash revenue and settlement, so I took out the fund balance, and I wanted to show you how proportionately
Wow.
the settlement had been very high,
Yeah.
over $4 million for a period of about 5 years. And in 2009, it got pretty close. The average that I have for a settlement over the last 3 years is roughly 3.3 million. and the 10-year average is 3.2. So we're pretty consistent for the amount of delinquent taxes that we have, but it does ebb and flow. So yes, you'll see a higher earnings in those high delinquent years, and we've kind of leveled off. I anticipate this year's to be probably about 3.1, 3.2. We're just finalizing those numbers, and we should have those completed within a month. So going back to the policy, we agreed to maintain a funded balance, meaning that I don't have to borrow to pay out the delinquent taxes at March 31st. And that equation that we came up with was 1.7 times the rolling annual average of the taxes returned delinquent to the county treasurer for the last 3 years. And if I take the $3.3 million 3-year average, multiply it by 1.7, it puts us at about $5.7 million that is within the range of the policy and maintaining a funded DTR. I know that the outstanding question is what's available, etc. We currently have $5.8 million in cash and investments. But we're continuing collecting, so as the year progresses, the items that were returned delinquent will be paid off, and so we'll be building that cash over the next 6 months.
With the price of properties, we ought to be able to anticipate that forfeitures go down. Because why would somebody forfeit when they could sell and make some money?
No, that's a good point. And there's no incentive for them to forfeit. I mean, I charge 18% on the last year collection. There's programs out there that help individuals that are behind. My half right now is through MSHTA, and they can do up to $20,000 for mortgage and delinquent taxes, and that's an application that is done through MSHTA. So we have some citizens that are using that to get caught up, but unfortunately, it is individual circumstance. I mean, we don't have a trend. For example, the properties that are subject to foreclosure this year, 75% of them are repeat offenders that just like to finance with me for whatever reason. And the remaining 25% are new issues, and we're working with them to either give them an extension or find funding through third-party partners. I've estimated that there might be 2 or 3 that I won't be able to help. So those would be subject to foreclosure.
But not enough of a trend suggests that we could modify our standard.
No, and it's all guided by statute. There's nothing that we really have discretion over, because I'm acting in capacity of just an agent for the schools, the state, and the county. We really don't have the authority to modify anything.
I think John's being a little modest, because John, I know you have worked personally with individuals to try to help them the best you could within your scope of services to help them to avoid their financial situations. I know
Absolutely.
a couple of them have told me they really appreciate it, that make a difference in them saving the property. So.
Yeah. I mean, and this goes for anybody in the county to be able to have a resource there to avoid losing their residence.
I don't think people know that you have been reaching out to people.
Well, I am aware you went out to help somebody in Northport, and you took some venison. meat to that family while you help them try to salvage their property.
Nice. Very nice.
So, as far as the DTR is concerned, it's healthy. I know we have some projects slated this year. I'd like to have continued dialogue as far as what the needs are for these projects. And keep in mind that, my priority is to stay self-funded. We do have a policy that gives us some guidelines as to what we should, try to keep in there to maintain self-funded. However, I know that sometimes is outweighed by the need for the projects to be completed, so. Is there any other questions that I can answer?
Just briefly, what are your projects you mentioned?
The broadband, the HVAC system, those
Okay,
big.
our projects.
Yes.
Separate then from your other
Your
other projects.
No, I don't have any projects, it's just,
Well, it's not your housing projects then. This is basically our projects. Okay.
yes. Housing projects are never county funded,
Fast track, land bank.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else?
Anything else? Nope. Okay. I guess we can move on. And MERS, right? Would MERS be another one of those projects?
MERS? No, you've taken that only from the general fund.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Haven't we taken it from DTR before?
No, before, yes, in the
Yeah.
past.
Oh, okay.
The last couple of years,
Okay.
last year and this year, it's just general.
But
fund.
not this year, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
So the last HVAC project was priority, and that drew down.
Quite a bit. Showed up
Yeah,
on
if
another
you,
chart.
right, if you want to move to the general fund 2017 to 2022 history spreadsheet there.
You look at this sheet, Jeff?
Yeah,
It's in your package.
Yeah, I read it once. There we go.
yep, so, I did a comparison a little bit on the delinquent tax. If you want me to go through the top portion, I can. Basically, what I did is I did the 2017 through 2021, what would have been your assessed values and what was collected through the treasurer's office via receipting. Settlements and adjustments that come in, when John became treasurer, he implemented a line item so that you can see what was delinquent in the prior year. In essence, it's going backwards. So actually, your 246 on the very first one there, 2017, the 246,404 is actually on the 26th, is the prior year. So it's kind of like a catch-all, but it rolls. So in 18, you collected 9.3, in 19, 9.6, in 20, 10.1, 21, 10, 3.9, plus the 247. So what I did in that total, that says 10,647,101.70. This was your actual, all collected taxes that fund your general fund. So in the budget for 2022, your current year taxes are 10.1, and your settlements are budgeted at 285. So this represents 10.4. In the past, what the treasurer and the clerk worked together when it comes to revenues. And I'll be moving forward and looking and talking with Andrew on this option. So in May, so we had this approved at 10.4, and in May, the equalization will come to you with the assessed values. Those assessed values and that meeting in May, you will set your millage rate. I'm not going to recommend to you what your millage rate should be, but you will want to facilitate within that millage rate to stay at a collection at least 10.4, if not more. So when we run the numbers, when we presented you with a 2021 budget, we were working with the 2019 assessment. Same here, so in 20, and then moving forward. I have adjusted budgets as long as I've taken over 4 revenue line items. I'm just a little bit, I guess, persnickety. I like to have my revenues and my expenditures balanced. And the next, you don't have to. As as this goes, your expenditures must be allocated for, but not necessarily your revenues. I like to see the history. I like to see that it was budgeted at 9.8 and 9.9 came in. I like to see that it was budgeted. So for this year, in 2022, you'll see 10.4 in your budgets. I'm expecting that if you pass your millage rate in May, that you should be collecting about 11.1, 11.2. Those revenues then offset what we use for fund balance forward, and that number is down lower. So when I was talking with Melinda this morning, I'm calling this a negative positive, which the difference from your 22 budget to your 2020 actual, so you actually collected 10.6 in 21, and your budget is 10.4 for current taxes. So you actually, budget-wise, have a shortage of 212, but I'm anticipating you will at least collect 10.6, if not more. Your unaudited 22 revenues over expenditures that rolled forward. On February 28th, I was called into this meeting and asked where to find some funds to pay for the $160,000 contract you wanted to negotiate. And so that number there was 380. So I've taken what should be collected is at least 10.6, which is the 212, added in the 380 that rolled to give you 592,000 that I believe you can use for this year's expenses. 160 of that has come out for DCS, so I believe you have 432. If you chose not to spend anything from the general fund, then that fund balance forward number would be reduced from 1.6, and it would come down if that was the case. Also depending on collection. Collection starts July 1st. It doesn't end until February 28th, February 27th each year, until the next year. So that number rolls. Fund balance used to balance your 22 budget is 1.6 million. And I can tell you that that's the highest number that we've ever done, as long as I've worked here, 1.6. Your fund balance changes on the bottom here is the beginning fund balance in the general fund and then the ending numbers. So you see there was growth in 17 and 18. In 19, you did put into MERS, as well as I've placed on here your HVAC and your LEC. Your DTR offset in 2016, 1.2 million was transferred out to the building fund, and then 525 to the general fund. In 22, you do not have any transfers out. Prior to that, or I should say after that, you became within your contract for Motorola. Your Motorola contract was for your new public safety radios. The DTR did front some of that project, as well as paid your bill over a couple of years. So then we come down to 2020, your difference of revenues over expenditures was a plus 496, and in 21 a plus 380. So that does mean that the fund balance forward to balance those budgets did come in and not need fund balance, and actually grew. So that is a bonus to your staff, your department heads, your elected officials that are spending under their budgets to attain that number.
So then basically, does that bring that 1.6 down to 1.2?
If you were to use everything that I have proposed without increasing your revenues, your 7.8 number would then be down by 1.6.
Linda?
Yes.
I think we ought to make sure that for our May meeting, before we start throwing out motions, our finance director remind us of this. We have a tendency to suggest millage rates without looking at the impact. And it looks to me like we have to be careful.
Yes, that'd be my recommendation.
I agree. I agree 100%.
Maybe we can do this before you actually make a motion, have Jen just give an update where we are. So we can put it on the agenda as a finance committee update, which would really tie into the next agenda item.
I was thinking beyond that in my mind going over this, because people are hurting so badly. I'd love to see us roll back if at all possible. But I don't think we're going to be able to. And the greatest majority of what we pay in taxes are schools, and that's uncontrollable too. But it's pinching
Yes.
already.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right.
The other document I gave you is, this will be a large adjustment and amendment. And in speaking to you today, that's why I wanted to bring up the taxable value and the fact that, the millage that you set for, 2022 will also have this adjustment in that spreadsheet that I gave you. So the 22 general fund wage and fringe adjustments, these are the wages and fringes. So I've taken Social Security, MERS, and I've taken, salaries, and I've recreated in essence the staffing levels with the proposed increases, which was 3.25%. The only union that had negotiated was the POAM, and they were at a 2%, so we increased them by the number, the 1.25, so that everyone will be adjusted in 22 before the 23 budgets are created at this rate. And that's gonna come up to approximately 214,000. That will then come from this number on your first page. So I will look to use the revenue number that you're gonna generate to help offset versus touching that fund balance forward.
Go over that, say that again.
Yep, so when these numbers go to be adjusted, it will be after you select your millage rate,
Yes,
so that I'm not using fund balance forward.
gotcha.
So I'm hoping that that
Yep.
money will be there in
You're
collection.
hoping with the
Mhm.
collection be enough.
Yep.
Okay.
So when it comes to reserves, you're kind of looking, I don't know if you need a definitive answer today. You have gone as low as 6.9. You probably could go a little lower, meaning you could use the 1 million. If you were to use 1 million in your 22 budget though, that means you're down another million. And if you use fund balance forward to budget your 23, which we always do, that's also another possible deficit, bringing that number down even farther. So I think it'll be a collaboration of where you would want the funds to come from if you have to match any of your ARPA. I believe that's the reason we're here today, is to,
One of the reasons.
one of the reasons is to kind of whittle down where all your money is. The taxable value, the assessed values, that will be a huge projection for what's going forward in the future too. Like I said, in the past, we've used that year to kind of facilitate what's going to be the next for our revenues. And so that's why we amend, we approve your taxes that we believe is gonna come in with an estimate. We generally, in the past, have not gone very high, leaving that there could be a $600,000 swing to the good. But with the expenses that you want to take into effect, I would stay on the caution side and try and stay close to that number that you're hoping to collect, would be my recommendation. You know, especially
So we'll know
for
that in
23. We know that, when I asked Andrew about it, he and Lori said May 9th they drop the rates for us, so they'll know what those taxables are. But the state can come in and do a correction of some sort,
Yep.
if necessary. Lori has said all the years she's been here that hasn't happened. So that could be our firm taxable assess that we're going to do on our millage, of the value. So definitely, when I talked with Andrew, he was hoping to get that for May.
But we'll select our millage rate in April?
No, you'll select it in May.
Oh, we will select it in May
Yes.
after we get those figures
Yes.
released. Okay.
Yep, you'll get them from Andrew, and then he'll ask for you what rate. Is it L429? On the L429.
Yep. Okay.
Any questions for me?
So the biggest issue is on the ARPA funds. For point communication, you made a commitment of 5 million, we allocated 3.2. So somewhere we can find out the difference. And that could be more ARPA funds,
Right.
or it could be a combination of ARPA funds and general fund dollars. So that's the biggest issue you got to face.
Correct, and that is not a capital outlay. I did verify with the auditors when this all came about. It is a federal award. And so one of the things that happens with a federal award is that the audit firm looks as to you as the board, as well as to the finance director, on how those monies are spent. So a single audit, when we spend over 750,000, which I presume you will be possibly in 22, maybe in 23, but probably here in 22. A single audit means that not necessarily that they're on site, but it means every document Every board minute, every motion, any invoice, anything is paid. Broadband will not be a county asset. It will be money that you are funneling into a project. And so I've discussed that with them. Because it's a little different than we, do 500,000 and put up a tower, that kind of thing. And these are federal awarded funds.
And they'll be budgeted that way, right? You're keeping those separate. so
Right.
that-
Right now, we have them what's in called a deferred line item,
Deferred
because we
line
don't want to see, if we had put in the 2.1 million that we had gotten last year, then this number at the bottom of your fund
It would have
balance would
walked.
reflect 9,
Yeah,
right?
we don't want
And we
that.
don't want to do that. So as you spend it, we pull it from deferred and we put it into
Okay.
our budgeted line item.
Yes, that's
Yep.
good.
Yep.
Okay. And I'm just gonna ask, we did kick around the idea of asking our representatives to hand us another 5 million or match our 4.2, but we really didn't take any action on that. Is it
Well,
worth sending a?
there's no process in place now. The state has not made a determination how they're gonna allocate their
They have not.
$5.8 billion.
And we've only asked them verbally to consider us, I mean, our representatives, but is it worth us sending?
I would
Asking
say
them
not
to-
yet at this point, because there's no process for them to go to. They can't go to a specific office and say, on behalf of Little County, we need this money. Now, at some point that may happen, but everyone's we're in the same situation as everybody else. It's, okay, the money's there, it's sitting there, the state has to allocate it, but how
I
are they
would
gonna do
just
it?
encourage them to get their
Yeah.
process figured out.
Well, that would be nice,
Okay.
but when you have that many people at the House and Senate, all with different ideas how they want to spend the money, it's, Jack O'Malley was joking, but it's true.
Yeah, I can help them. I'll go talk to them.
The bigger the money, the more difficult it is, because everybody wants a piece of the pie,
Yeah.
and everybody wants to be involved with the process. And especially being an election year for the governor, there's different paths on how they want to allocate it. And by law, they don't have to spend the monies until 2024, just like we don't have to. So there really is no place to go to ask
So,
someone to help us.
That being said, Jen, as we start this project, we're not going to pay this project all up front. We're hopefully going to pay it in maybe 5 increments,
Mhm.
in the last
Yeah.
increment maybe being at the end.
We're actually working with them on the contract
Right,
terms now, because as
okay.
you know, you authorized me to enter a contract
Yes, so
conditions.
you're
You have not
doing that.
approved the contract
Okay,
yet.
so let's just say, can we say when we expect to actually have to come up with our deficit, the 1.6
By
short?
probably the end of next year, December of 2023.
We would have to continue to fund the project, we would have to come up
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Yep, you use your
So
ARPA money
hopefully
first.
stay-
We are working
Yep.
with them and our consultant to come up with a payment schedule.
So nothing we're gonna have to budget in we're not gonna have to put that in our budget for 2023, are we? Or should we be looking at that?
I'm hoping by the end of this year, there'll be a definition and a process how to
Yeah,
get the
me
fund.
too.
And, like last time with the 4.2, literally, I just got an email. There was no application process. There was no, with the other funds, like the community development block grant, there was a process we had to go through. This literally was an email that showed up that we got 4.2. There's some talk is, that they may just match it
Yeah,
dollar for
yeah.
dollar. And we may just get emails sometimes saying, okay, the state has decided they're gonna match every county's allocation. And they still would have surplus funds even if they did
Right.
that. So it's really difficult at this
projects.
point.
I would say to stay with the audit firm's recommendation is that when you spend your ARPA money, that you have your special meeting, you make your recommendation, and then that's when you adjust your budgets. My recommendation would not be anything built in 23. Know
Okay.
where your money may come from,
Okay, that was my
prepared that
question.
way, what you could use. But it works best, I found in the past, that you make your motion, we adjust your budget accordingly, and we move on from there versus wrapping it into your
Okay,
23
good,
credit.
that's what I would prefer we do. Okay. All right. Is that, anything else you want to go over with the
No,
reserve funds?
that's all I had.
Well, thank you, Jen.
Helpful.
You're
Thank
welcome.
your part, too.
Yep.
And Jen will give an update to the full board at our special meeting on April 19th.
Okay.
On this thing, and also just remind everyone what money we actually have allocated from ARPA so far.
Okay, good. All right, you want to talk about recommendation to convert
Yeah.
chief deputies to salaries?
Yeah, as you know, during last year's budget process, we started a dialogue about our non-union pay scale. And we all kind of agreed that it needs to be looked at. The big question is, how do we do it? I've done this enough times in many places that there never is an easy or a smooth process. Everyone has their views and opinions, but if we don't start at some point, we're never going to get any progress. So we've been talking about doing this for a couple of years, a little more specific during our budget process last year. And I think it's September, you asked it to continue working on it and at some point come up with some recommendations. So we wanted to get through the labor contracts first. And so we got those done. And then we said after the first of the year, we'd start looking at that. So this is basically our second meeting. I'm just hoping to have a dialogue here. I'm hoping that Jen and John and Michelle will participate also, because we started at our last meeting, we decided we were going to look at the chief deputies first, because we had to start somewhere. And so you did make a couple of minor adjustments last year during the budget process in terms of prosecutor's office and with senior services. So those are, if you look at the sheet here, those are included in there. And so after our last meeting, we decided we would meet internally. So the treasurer, clerk, register of deeds, and I met several weeks ago to see where we're at. And so we have a couple of different recommendations to start with. And once again, I was going to do some memos and so forth, but I really want this to be a dialogue between all of us. And so I welcome the three elected officials to participate. And then after that, the judge and Joel have a different issue that's on the agenda after that. That's kind of separate. And we are at the beginning of the stages. And obviously with inflation being high, I don't think I'm telling you anything confidential, but you'll hear in the next couple of weeks that Grand Traverse County has decided to give all of their employees, union and non-union, a 5% increase to deal with the inflation. The chief deputy administrator mentioned that to us last week. They've been talking about that at the board meetings
It's
too.
your second one. We did one
Yeah.
in January.
Yeah.
We have this one.
Yeah,
Wow.
but they, on top of, so they settled labor contracts just like we did, and they gave their raises. I think there was 2.5 originally that they agreed on, then in the contracts, they agreed, and then, but on top of that, they're in the process now of getting a letter of agreement, because anytime you go outside a contract, you have to have a letter of agreement, that they're gonna be awarding, probably the next couple of weeks, a 5% across the board increase for all of their employees. So it doesn't matter if you're union, elected, or a department head, everyone is gonna get a 5% increase on top of their labor contracts. But we looked at, one of the things that I always thought was a little unfair here is when you look at our chief deputies and the executive assistant, those people are in leadership positions and they're hourly employees. At my last administrators meeting, I brought it up, and actually it started off with our legal counsel, Mr. Stoker, was on the assumption when we were talking about the chief deputies' pay that they were salaried. They're not. The majority of counties are salary positions. Those people do have extra duties, responsibilities. They are basically at-will employed. Most of them come internally, so they give up their union status, which means they're at-will employed. So at any point, any of the three, or any of the elected officials, with the three that are here, could decide that their chief deputy is not working out and could let them go. And they do have extra duties and responsibilities. So one of the first things I could talk about, and I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I think the clerk, the treasurer, and the register of deeds are in favor of converting these positions to salary positions. Is that a fair statement?
That's good. That's
Okay,
good.
everyone? Yeah.
Okay, so,
No, well, I just want
Well-
to stop with that first.
all right. So I guess the next question would be what amount?
Yeah,
would
if you look at
recommend?
our pay scale, our department heads, some of the people are salaried positions. And like I said, if you look at the four that I highlighted, just because I want to start with those four, they have a lot of duties, responsibilities. They do have leadership responsibility. Jen Grant brought up the fact that her chief register of deeds, who took the job when Jen became the register of deeds, her total compensation was 12 cents an hour, right?
12 cents an hour more than who she's in charge.
Yeah, then she, yeah.
So if we start right at the top there of your highlighted, so you got your chief deputy treasurer at $26 an hour, $26.74. Now, I can't multiply that by 2,000 hours because we don't have
Yeah,
2,000 hour work week.
I
So
can-
what does that?
Yeah, I can,
calculate out
and I'll round these numbers off, okay?
to? All right,
If you look at the hourly employees
yep,
who are in the union, on an average, they make 42,000 per year.
42,000?
Yeah.
Average for all four?
No.
No, for the,
For the first three?
yeah. So when you look at that, and like I said, I'm rounding them off. I don't include any overtime or any extra compensation, about
Okay.
40. If you look at the chief deputies on their standard pay, it is, if you look at the chief deputy treasurer and the register of deeds, it's 49,000.
Oh, wait, okay, back up, because that's what I was at, okay, so you said on average it's 42,000 was
For the workers, like the people who are in the office working.
Not the.
The
not-
union members.
Not the chief
Not the
deputy.
chiefs.
For chief deputies, back up, so for the chief deputy treasurer, take the 2674 times.
For the chief
What was
deputy
that
of
one?
the treasurer and the register of deeds, it's 49,000.
49,000, okay, that's,
I'm rounding these numbers up.
yes, I understand. And then the chief deputy clerk, it's
Yes,
obviously because
how
it was
much-
more duties, but it came out.
Well, the pay's different there, that's,
Yeah.
and how much is that one on average? Just straight, not talking about any
51
overtime or anything.
Something, right.
About 54 maybe, 54,000?
Okay, what, I'm sorry,
Chief, the clerk, chief clerk.
I have approximately
I can-
55.
I can just
Oh, okay,
stop you
close
right
enough.
here, Melinda,
Yeah,
or Commissioner Lautner.
Yes.
The hourly employees, we have multiple hourly rates. We have also multiple hours. The chief deputy's base is 1,820 hours per week,
okay,
per year. Right.
20 per
Sorry,
year,
misspoke.
right.
So,
It
it would
feels
be
like
about
a week.
48, just shy of 49 for the chief,
Treasurer.
treasurer at maximum, and we're working with maximum as opposed to where they are.
Okay.
The Register of Deeds, I'm certainly not going to speak for her, but she has a different issue with the placement of where her current chief is in relationship to those she's supervising in that close pay. The 2968 times 1820
Mhm.
is 54.
54, okay.
And before you start looking just too far, Chet's probably going to lead you into these. But these three, and they're different from that of the executive assistant, so I don't even touch Chet's position. These three positions are political appointees. And Chet has touched on this just a little bit with you, and I do have a copy of the legal opinion. And it does affect my office more than the other two positions, because there can be no attempt to restructure my chief deputy. You can restructure it into a salary position, but not in an attempt to diminish the pay that was earned in 2021,
Right.
regardless of how that pay came to be.
Right.
And the fact that the board chose to pull finances from me becomes irrelevant in the discussion. So you're not going to be able to
Yeah.
set a salary at 54,000 for that position. And we were talking when we met with Chet at a different, and he will guide you on that.
We can't lower it, but can we set a salary higher than?
Yes, you can set a salary
Okay,
higher.
that's what.
And
And our
She
goal is
said
never
that's
to
what we-
lower anyone's.
Right,
And I'm
exactly, I just want to
also
make that
well
clear.
aware of why we're doing this. And I'm trying to be bubbly, and I apologize because I've been sick for 7 days. And so I'm a little hoarse. But I just want us to be very careful when we tread here, and I do have the legal opinion to give you that tells you if anyone is of the mindset that you're going to take 2968 for my chief and multiply it by 1820 and set the salary, it's going to be a violation of the law. And so I'm not saying that to be heavy and to be negative, I'm just saying it can't be done.
Well, let's just keep going, because like I
Yeah.
said, this is a dialogue, and really, as you remember, I brought this up the last couple of years, just never was the right time to look at it. So this really has nothing to do about the restructuring of the new departments. This is something I think we should have looked at years ago. I believe that this structure was put in place in the late 90s, right, Michelle, approximately? I know it was before.
I think so, it's been.
It was before
around.
Jen was here, I know she told me.
Yeah, it's maybe
I thought Jen was
93.
So really, since that time, we really have never looked at it. And the biggest issue that I noticed is if you look at any of these, there's no uniform process between start year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4.
Correct.
Some people got a 5% increase, some got 2.8, some got 12, some got 20-some% increase. So I think so let's just kind of break it down, because if you look at the big picture, it can be overwhelming, and we're never going to make progress. It's like the old saying, what's the best way to climb a mountain? One step at a time. So we're taking one step at a time. So if you look at the deputy's position, I think all 4 of us are in agreement that based on what these people do, their responsibilities, they're all critical to the organization, they should be salary. And there's no legal issues with that. Most counties have these positions, including the executive assistant as salary position. And that way you don't have the issue with the controversy of overtime and all that stuff. And I think we have some great people here, and I think they have taken on a lot of extra duties. And I think it's only fair we treat them as professional. A great example is John's had some health issues the last couple of years. I think Darcy's really stepped up to the plate. I think professionally, as far as I know, has done a great job.
She's done a wonderful job.
Yeah.
Taking a leadership role.
Yeah.
And responsibility for the office.
And we talked about Laurel has done a lot of extra duties, including now with Parks and Recs and so forth. And I think we just need to recognize these people as professionals. If you keep looking at the list down the list, when you look at our department heads, elected officials, if you go, I'm not talking about the court people, I'm just talking about the rest of them. They're all salary. So we talk about what would be a fair way to kind of convert this. And one of the things that we came up with, that at least the treasurer and the register of deeds and myself are in agreement, a good way to start, if you look at the assistant 911 director, and like I said, I'm keeping names out of this because it really is not about the people, it's about these positions. If you look at that person is basically a chief deputy in the department head, if you look at it that way. If you look at their salary, it's a range of 56 to 63. And once again, I'm just rounding these up.
And you referenced not court employees.
Yeah.
Is that because the court's not interested, or?
No, they're here, they're gonna talk about that later.
Okay.
And they have a little different structure because they're semi-independent and everything. So, and they're hourly, and that's next on the agenda, and that's where we'll hear too. But like I said, I can make a case on the planning department, I can make cases on the sheriff. We talked about last time, and you weren't here, but
I read it.
from a financial standpoint, it doesn't make much sense that some of our deputies are making more money than our undersheriff and our sheriff. Yeah. Is that really logical? When you think about, for example, Mr. Kiesel, what his responsibilities are, from a strictly financial standpoint, he would have been better off staying in his former position. And we want good people to advance. And you can make a point that if you look at the pay difference between the sheriff and the undersheriff, it's pretty minor. And then you look at that, I'm going off topic a little bit, but that's just another example where we have deputies here making more money than our leadership in our sheriff's department.
Okay,
There's an ethical
but-
problem there.
All right, you just answered part of my question, and that is, because when I look at these scales, I don't see anybody, say, making more than our undersheriff, unless you get down to the prosecutors.
No, yeah, I'm not comparing I'm just
So
talking
you're
about.
talking deputies?
Yeah, I bring that up as an
But
example.
that's only because of overtime. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah.
That's overtime that drives deputies?
Overtimes are compensated for.
Yeah.
These positions, the overtime, it's not compensated. We put in more than
over the 40-hour work weeks, we receive no additional money.
As an undersheriff, you put in more
Yes.
hours, but because your salary.
As a direct example, in 2021 as undersheriff, I made less than I did as lieutenant.
Yep, that's always
So
been.
I just bring that up as an
Yep.
example. You know, we want to have good people. At some point, the sheriff's going to retire. At some point, there's going to be an open for sheriff. At some point, it's going to be open for undersheriff. And we want good people to look at those. I mean, that's a different topic, but I just use that as an example. But if you look at the assistant 911 director, if you look at his starting pay versus his top pay on seniority, at least the treasurer and I and Register of Deeds agreed that'd be a good starting point to talk about putting the chief deputies in that same pay range. Michelle has some different thoughts, so I don't want to speak on her behalf.
No, I see what
Is
you're
that
saying.
position at full pay now? The 911 assistant?
You mean at full pay in years of service?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has he been here long enough now?
Yeah, I
He
did,
has,
I did
okay.
all the wages.
Yeah. If you look at the positions that have been created in the last, well, at least 10 years, I have worked with Michelle and Jen. If you look at the percentage difference between step one, between the start, year 1, year 2, year 3, is compatible.
What
That
was
hasn't
that?
been the case in the past.
Commissioner Robbins, was that your question? Is the person filling that at maximum right now?
Right.
Yes, I could go pull the wage chart. if you
No,
want.
I think he's been here long
I'm
enough.
pretty sure that he is. If he's not, he's really close.
Okay.
Another comparison while you're into this discussion is the assistant prosecutor. That's very similar to the assistant director 911, as far as the comparison.
Which one, John, the special pay for Tristan? Or
No, the one right below Tristan,
the
assistant
assistant
prosecutor.
Third. See, third?
And I understand what we're doing, but why, I suspect, I mean, we did it with the prosecutor's office earlier this year, and now we'll do it with these three for positions, then we'll be back and look. Why aren't we doing it as a group? And why aren't we looking at all of them and doing that salary and wage study that we talked
Well,
about?
that's an option we talked about.
Because my fear is that we're going to adjust 3 positions, and then we're going to be back here next month looking at a couple more and a couple more.
If you want to do a full wage and study scale, we could do that. That's going to cost some money, obviously. It's been happening here before. I don't know when.
I know that there was a wage study in '93. I think I've been part of 2 of them. And I totally understand what you're saying, but if you think you have, which is subjective, but if you think you have unhappy people now, you do a wage study and you're going to really have unhappy people. Because it is simple as you heard the public comment this morning about unhappiness in a negotiated union contract that was voted on by the union. People are not going to like this. There is no easy way to do this. I think the main question from you to solve a potential concern that certain individuals have based on the workload of my office and the overtime and the extra hours, just by the nature of our job, court, elections, and the different schedule we have to run on, in order to nip some of that perception of the overtime is to get these chiefs to salary. That will stop at least that controversy of people focusing on my workload and those hours. At least it nips that. You can certainly do this whole thing, but Chet can tell you. I can tell you this is not going to be pleasant.
I can tell you because this was brought up at my administrator's roundtable. In theory, we had a brand new administrator in Massachusetts County that suggested that the best way to do it is do a work analysis and bring in a consultant in. I personally have been through 4 of these work studies. Each time it's done it, it's caused huge controversy. Now, the 4 that I'm involved with, not a single one was ever adopted. Because no matter how you do it, you get people upset. The rest of the administrators who are in this call, about 7 and 8 of them went through it. They all have the same experience. It just causes tremendous emotional upheaval because no matter how you do it, there's going to be winners and losers. It's like affordable housing. Everyone wants affordable housing, but don't want it next to them. Everyone wants to do a wage study until it gets right down to it. You're going to spend probably at least 20-some thousand, at least. And whether you're going to adopt it or not, the last time it was done here, I can't tell what it was, Michelle was here, the exact same happened. It happened in Grand Traverse County a couple years ago. They brought in consultants, they looked at it, when it came to it, the board didn't adopt it because they just could not agree on it. I mean, so we can do it, but I can tell you from experience, and Michelle can tell you, coming from different perspectives, that they're very emotionally charged.
And I suspect you're right, but I'm looking here at this list, and we're talking, I think we're talking about 64, you mentioned 64,000 for deputies.
Well, the range, yeah, the range.
Well, how long is it going to be before Prosecutor Hubble comes in and says, my assistant prosecutor has the top of the scale is 63,000?
Yeah, and that's why we're trying to keep the names out of it. You made an adjustment, whether it's right or wrong, with one individual, based on that individual, when you did Mr. Chamberlain. I personally think that causes a lot of issues when you start about the individuals. So what we're trying to do is base it on the positions, not the individuals that are in those positions. Because whatever you do is going to have a long-term impact. Because at any point, any of these chief deputies could move on somewhere else. They could have a disagreement with their boss, they could be terminated. We're fortunate that we have very good employees here, but they are taking a risk. So, and also, as we all know, there's a big controversy over overtime and who was getting how much overtime. If you put them on salary, it gets rid of that. But I think also you treat them as professionals, which they are. And I would think you would agree that if you look at the chief deputies that we've had here, we've had very good, hardworking people. But if you look at it, the rest of the professionals, the department heads, and even the assistant department heads are all salary. Yet the chief deputies are hourly employees. So I think there's also a mental perception that where they fall in terms of their duties and responsibilities and leadership skills. And, you know, each office is a little different, but when any of these people are gone, for whatever reasons, the chief deputies do have the legal authority to make decisions. They have the right to sign. We had to get some clarification on that. They're John's absences, but they do have the legal authority to sign and make decisions in the absence of the elected official.
I can't speak for Jen because I'm not as familiar with the Register of Deeds because there's Register of Deeds and then there's clerk registers. But as far as John's and mine, and I'm not putting words in his mouth, the job descriptions of our two chief deputies are very simple: to carry out the statutory duties of the elected official as directed in their absence. That is how basic and simple our job descriptions can be, because they are here to function in our absence. I'm sure Jen's
I have the
is like
statute
that,
here,
too.
it's very
Yeah.
similar.
And so, I mean, John's and mine for sure are, and I don't, you know, it's not my area of interest to.
Shall perform the functions and duties of the Office of Register of Deeds.
Yeah, and so, I mean, that's how simple our jobs, we don't need job descriptions that are 4 pages long. And I'm not trying to
So-
muddy this, I just
I got
want to move forward.
I've got a question. So, I get, one point with these positions they are risky. Because basically well, they're not even guaranteed 4 years, but basically almost guaranteed 4 years, but not really. And I suppose the same could be argued for the executive assistant, because a new administrator might
Could come
not
in
like that executive assistant. So, but that's kind of another argument. And as you said, the arguments will start coming down the line. Well, you know, I'm head of a department and I only make 3,000 more. But my question would be, is if we are going to recommend that these go to salary, and you're recommending, it sounds like, that they go to the same as the assistant 911 director, would it be fair to go to that start scale rather than jump? Or is that the recommendation?
We won't have dialogue on that.
You
Okay,
have to
so
have
because
that-
that, I mean, to take like, oh gee, you know, a $13,000 raise right off the bat, I don't know how palatable that's
Well,
going to be toward.
Chet, may I?
Oh,
It's
sure.
kind of like when we adopted the Teamsters contract, and the starting pay was removed, and the
Class
columns
two.
were renumbered. We took those people, if they were at 2-year, they came down to 2 years. So everyone got a minimum of 3.25. Some
Okay.
got more. Because the difference between these three positions you're talking about, these are political appointees.
Right.
So, in answer to your question, could that occur? Perhaps. But what you have to look at is that you are not diminishing the wages paid. So if you have, and I'm just picking on the treasurers because that position is at the maximum. So if you look in 2021, it was 47,282. You know that you cannot, and now you're already into 2022 with a
Right.
3.25 adjustment. You know you cannot go behind that, and one would presume that you would want to take that 47 and take it and increase it to 3.25. But at the other hand, because you're changing these to salaries, you have an employee that's been 4 years here. Is that right to move them just because I would say not. They are entitled to go to the top. I mean, that would be the argument as the elected official to you, not to say you're going to come to the bottom. But if we could have a consensus from you, I would think that you would agree with salary.
With
I-
the-
Well, or I guess, I don't know, I'm just thinking, I get the idea of the salary, I really do. But right now, you have someone making 49, just round it up, say they're 50,000, they're making 50,000 hourly. And we're saying, but if we move you to salary, you will jump automatically $7,000 increase. And then the next year, they would go up another
Yeah.
1,500, the next year they go up another 1,500, on up to, and in 5 years, they would be at 63,000. Where if we don't touch it, hourly is only gonna go up to or probably average of what, 3% a year. This has to be a lot bigger
So you
jump,
could,
isn't it?
yeah,
Or
I mean,
even say a 1 year, even if you went to 1 year. And none of
Yeah.
those then would be behind what they're making now, because that's what we absolutely
would
don't
you have
want
the right to do that? Yes, you would. They don't have to, because someone is on step 4 and making 48,000. We don't automatically have to put them on step or year 4. If you go to the administrative director and put them at 63, you could put them at 56.9. I think that was your question. You could put them at the starting pay scale. Still is a $7,000
Well,
increase.
starting or even one year.
Well, I mean,
And
that's
I
a
mean,
decision you
it's
as a
just-
board have the right to do.
Because even that then will get 3% raises on top of that,
Every year, well, assuming the board.
average or more likely.
One of the reasons we looked at this number, if you look at the difference between the staff people at 49 and the elected at 75, go halfway, it falls within that pay scale.
Well, and I get that you kind of chose what makes sense as assistant 911 director, but I don't remember why we started that at 63. What the argument was for starting that at 63. It probably should have been more in line with where the other ones were at the time.
Well, he didn't start at 50, he started at the
Well, or
starting
56,
stage.
but he's,
Yeah,
I don't know, he didn't start at 56, I don't think.
I think he did start.
Think so?
Yeah,
Came in at
he
56?
did.
Okay.
So because he's been here 4 years.
And he's up there now. Yeah, I don't know, it's just a thought, go ahead.
So how is it set up now? I know you just got elected a year and a half ago. Now, when you made your chief deputy, where do they start? Year 1?
She started at year 1 because she would have taken a pay cut.
Okay,
because she was at the top of the
Now-
union.
that's for you, now for you, Michelle. Since you have your new interim chief, where does she start?
Starts at 2967 because you cannot diminish the pay of an appointed official
Okay.
during my term of office.
Just because okay. They could,
And the reason why, see, let's just say, just to give you an example, let's say the person that was in Jen's position prior to her had left office prior to the end of her term. And then Jen was appointed, let's say, by the committee that would make that appointment. And then she had brought in her, and made her chief. Her chief would have come in at the rate of pay that Jen was making, which would have been, without the adjustments, the top of the pay scale. But the elected official filled out their term of office, so therefore it started it back where Jen goes to the beginning, and then that chief went back to the beginning.
okay.
So
And
Michelle.
that's how where we are.
Michelle, let me ask this question, because your pay scale is different than the other, than the
Correct.
treasurer and the rest of your deeds. So you brought in as someone that's been a veteran here, has been here several years, you decided to put her at the top, which is your choice.
Correct.
You could have brought in someone, let's say, brand new off the,
At the same rate.
you could have, or you could have started them at 2277.
I could have, but I would be against the law. I mean, as far as if
She
you
had
had
to,
tried to push me.
Now, can I just stick on that thing?
Yeah.
So, and I want to clear this up because, and we probably have to get, you're saying that your wage here that the board approved is 2277 to 2968, right?
Correct.
You're saying you have to start them at 2968?
I am saying that.
Midterm.
Jen, could you help me and pass these three out? Chet's already got this.
And I'm saying, I'm not talking about Jen Zawicki here.
No, I asked her to pass them out.
No, let's just say that you did have an internal candidate
Correct.
and you posted the job externally and someone with no experience
I could
came in.
consider that, but the salary of the deputy clerk may not be restructured during the current term of office, which may potentially result in diminishing.
But it's not being restructured. This is on the pay scale that was approved by the board.
This was, and I could have went lower, but it's within my approved.
No, oh, I'm not disagreeing with
Is
that.
that what you were asking?
No, just John and Jen can put their employees on the step
Jen
scale.
is in a different,
Well, I'm talking about normal circumstances.
normal, so when the treasurer, I'm sorry, I need to reach it for you. When the treasurer hired his chief deputy, the last one, midterm, she automatically came in and went right to the top of the scale.
So let's look at the undersheriff, for example.
Yes, prime example.
The undersheriff range is 75 to 82.
Mhm.
The sheriff could put a new undersheriff anywhere within that range.
He could have, but he didn't.
No, I'm just talking about, I'm not talking about
I
any
don't know
specific people.
now because now you've got an establishment of the 1 year rate. Because at the time, you and I know that I had the conversation, because we talked about it, and Jen had the conversation, that came to the board to fill the position, but it did not need to come to the board, because when he was hired, he could have been hired in at 82,388.
No, I'm not.
Okay,
I'm
that's what
saying
you're
though,
answering.
it's the elected official's choice. The new undersheriff, whoever it would be,
The sheriff could have done that because the
could have
budget was
done it at
approved
anywhere from 75.2 to 82.3.
in that case, but
And
that's
in
not.
theory, any of you could have put your people from 2070 to 2674.
The register of deeds could
I
not,
could not.
because she was a new officer
Well, I know,
without
I'm talking
her
about.
budget.
I'm
But
talking
the
about-
sheriff could have, and that was explained.
I'm trying to take all the people out of it.
Well, it's hard to.
Yes,
I mean,
it
because
is.
they've got
But-
more moving parts.
As I understand, new people, not those things. So if you have an opening for a chief deputy clerk, you have the ability, it's not a board decision, because this is what the board approved, a range anywhere from 2277 to 2968, and that's your choice.
Yes. And when you.
Just as John or Jen's choice.
Correct, and when you move that to salary, and these two aren't in the same jeopardy situation because of the lack of overtime.
Yeah.
That I am. So when you're looking at salary, you can't establish a salary to try to circumvent the potential that could be made at the hourly rate with the
So let's
overtime.
just use that example. Let's just say, and once
Okay.
again, no name here, let's assume your chief deputy, on an average made, you said 50,
No, I said that in
50.
4.
base pay, 54.
68, oh, that would be on 1820.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we can't look at that.
Well, let me just finish my logic here,
Okay.
okay? And actually, I'm just questioning this. It's 54, and let's say that year, for whatever reason, they had $10,000 in overtime, so they'd be at 64. And that person left, or took another job, or got transferred. Are you saying that you have to pay the next person the 64,000?
They have the right to maintain that without it being diminished, and it's actually
Okay.
68, and it does not
Okay,
matter.
I think that's where we have a
Okay,
disagreement
that's what
from.
you're talking
I have
about.
talked to Bonnie, David Stoker, at
68,000.
length about this to make sure I understood. Overtime talks regardless of, impacts this regardless of how it was earned.
And we can clear this up because I got a
Yeah.
different verbal opinion when I talked to Mr. Stoker. He
Yeah.
said it's based on the proof's salary, because not that anyone would do this, but let's say John wants to bump up Darcy's thing and have her work a lot of overtime, and then Darcy leaves, the next person coming in would not be entitled to that. And we can clarify this with Mr. Stoker told me.
Okay.
It has to stay, you can't lower these pay scales, but extra compensation does not count towards the pay scale.
David is very clear
But that's not in the legal opinion, it doesn't say
that,
that.
he says, we're making this too complicated. You look at the W-2.
But in theory, with overtime, how do you control that then?
Well, you're going to, because you're going to put it to salary now.
Well, let's say there was a unique year where, like, I mean, once again, I want to talk about having individual, you had a unique year where you had someone work a lot of overtime, and that person quit, and those circumstances will not come again. The new person coming in would not be entitled to that
Then you have to,
W-2. It's based on what's on the pay scale,
You
it's not
have-
based on the individual's income, is the way Mr. Stoker explained to me.
right. I've talked to him since then, and Bonnie, because they're
I think we need to get that
experts.
clarified.
You have to
Yeah.
change it in 2024 if you think it is being overpaid.
We do need to get clarification. Now I understand where you're coming from. Now you're saying that's why the 63 isn't high enough. So, okay, Rick, go ahead. Did you have a
Okay,
question?
first of all, I want to talk about, I'm not going after your office. I'm trying to help these two people.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm not trying to lower, you know.
Right.
That's what we have
And
two
I-
separate.
What I'm more concerned about is, you know, it's kind of like with the undersheriff's position, you know, you get a new sheriff and he hires somebody off the street, you know, he could put them down to the lower rate, and I don't want to see, you know, these two positions, you know, I want to see them like go to salary and set a standard here. I don't want to see somebody that has 15 years in John's office and decides to be his chief deputy and has to go to a lower rate and lose money. So that's what I'm trying to.
Yes,
And that's what happened in my office.
Right.
and I think we're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Right, right.
I'm not trying to lower the clerk's. chief-
No, I don't think that's anyone's intention.
Yeah.
I think all of us would be in agreement with John. I don't want to speak for him, but you're correct. If you're going to establish the salary, it's not right for that. And I have seen it done that way here. I have seen it done. But if she's at the max and you adopt a 4-year maximum scale, she gets the benefit of that 4 years. Understanding it might be a $14,000 pay increase, but she served her time.
And like my chief deputy would be at a 2-year, because she hasn't been here the full.
Okay.
But you as two elected people cannot bring your deputy chief up to full pay without board approval.
Well, you can't up to this.
Okay.
Only to-
I
only
mean,
what's
no,
on
you
this.
start off, okay, like you just got elected. And could you have brought your chief deputy up to 49?
I had to come to the board for approval to get her at a 1-year, or she would have taken a pay cut, so that is up to you guys to decide where
Okay.
she falls.
And Jen might be able to help me out with this, but if you went to this Assistant Director 911 pay scale, but only approved a budget of year 2, I don't think that the elected officials would be able to circumvent that. It would be set by the budget rules, correct?
Well, I think that's where your legal opinion comes in, because you have a pay scale that's been adopted by the board, and you're paying your chief at the top, at the top year. So the clarification would be, is if that top year now into 63, how can you deny your employee that wage?
Maybe based on the board's.
No, because it's a
But they still
schedule.
be making more money.
This is a
Right.
schedule that's approved.
Right.
So this is approved, part of the budget packet, this is approved when you do your increases, so.
But as I stated, we have the right to raise it, you just can't lower it.
I believe you'd have the right to raise, you just wouldn't bring your four-year chief deputy in at at the start.
But if the
It'd be
pay
at
is more, we do have that right.
No, I don't believe you do.
I believe we do.
Okay. I believe
I mean,
your
we can
legal,
prove that.
I believe your legal opinion states
It
that,
doesn't state that in there.
that you cannot diminish it. So
We're not diminishing.
if you have an approved budget and John has overtime and Darcy works more than 1820, and she has the right to earn that because it's budgeted, it's
Yeah.
within his budget, just like in the clerk's office, you can't take that pay down. Even if it's in a salary, even if it's
But
salary.
so a way for me to take Chet's example in my office, if I went to the board and asked for a budget of $5,000 in overtime, the board could never reduce that. It would stay at the budgeted amount if it's for my chief deputy to,
So the difference is like, so I would explain the difference as these are elected officials. So you have 3 elected officials. This board can't take this action and state that Jen goes back to the 1 year, or back to the start. So what on this schedule is that she is in her term of office at the 1 year. So that's where her pay is.
Let's look simple, let's look at Darcy, because it's good to have names. Darcy's making $48,000.
right.
We decide to put her on salary at the beginning scale of 50, was it? 56.
57, basically.
Let's say 57.
So
We're not lowering her compensation.
So I believe what you'd have to do is you'd have to get your legal opinion to state that you have a separate schedule. Because her schedule is, she is a
And once
4-year employee. That's all, I'm
Yeah.
just
It was
I'm
my
just stating what
interpretation, I
this
could
is.
be wrong, that as long as their compensation is not lowered, we have the right to restructure them from hourly to salary, as long as the compensation is not reduced. So if you look at Darcy's example, from 48 to a salary of 55 is not a reduction. That'd be within our right to do that.
Ty had a question.
Thank you. If in fact this legal opinion is what Michelle says it is, we need to look at our overtime policy, because what Michelle is saying is if I pay overtime 1 year, I gotta pay that for the next 3 years, and
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying when you're trying to convert the salary, you can't go and skew my numbers to make that impossible if the need is there for me to do it. But when you're setting a salary, you can't come back and take my 2968 multiplied by 1820 and say that's going to be the salary when I have an appointed person that makes 68,000. We're not going to, if it stays hourly and there isn't a need for 100 of the 400 hours, no, we're not going to work that.
But
We're not
say,
playing
well,
that
where we are now, if that's true, then we're saying that if we really do what the administrator is recommending, we're going to set all of these at a rate we can't afford.
Yeah.
So
Well,
we ought to
we
say,
might not
let's look
go.
at this in 3 more years, or 2 more years.
Going there, yeah. Rick, did you have a comment? Okay, because this is what, first of all, I can see we're really not going to get anywhere today until we fully understand this question and get a legal opinion on whether he's a W-2 or whether the overtime and whether we have, because we have another employee that's not the same employee, and does that new employee fall in under the old employee? These are all really good questions.
Yeah.
The other thing we've got is, we also added a position in one office to help alleviate some of the need for the extra hours overtime. So the other question might be, as we're talking, is maybe we have to wait and make these effective 2025 instead of now, so we don't have that issue. I hate to see us have to wait that long. The other thing would be, is if we're going to convert to salary, is not use anything on here and have the 4-year rate be something down around where the start is. And that, we really don't want to do. There's ways to circumvent that, I suppose, if we wanted to, but we don't want to do that. I think we can all work together and figure this out, but we need to know.
Could we still explore the other 3 and just leave the clerk separate till 23?
You could, I mean, it's up to you, really, as the board decides that.
No.
We can get this issue clarified, because like I said, I had a verbal discussion with Mr. Stoker a month ago, and not talked to him since. This opinion was issued yesterday. I interpreted it different than the clerk. Doesn't mean she's incorrect, she could be right.
Right.
She's talking to them. I'm basing that on a verbal discussion I had with Mr. Stoker, that basically said it's the base salary. I'm making it very simple here. We can't lower the base salary, but any extra compensation should not be included if we were to.
So we have to have a
do
chance
that.
to read this, so.
And if you read that, you can read that 2 different ways. I read that differently.
Get more
than Michelle read it.
interpretation.
And she could be right. I mean, I'm not a legal expert. I had a discussion based on a concern you had, Mr. Robbins, about a month ago about that. So since then, I've not had any discussion with legal counsel on this.
Todd?
Taking what Rick said, could we adjust all 4, but 1 delay implementation?
That's one of the questions we'll ask Chet to
Okay.
also get.
I think we could adjust them, even take away the clerk's office. The other ones, I don't think we have an issue with.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
would you, I don't know how soon you want to meet, this is percolating with this overtime. Obviously, the Register of Deeds has a more urgent issue because her chief is so close in pay to those she's supervising. What if, are you buying into the salary? It will solve issues. Regardless of what the salaries are, it will solve issues. If Chet, because I have had more conversations with them and they told me I understand this, I am willing, if Chet wants to, and you would accept it, so that we can not wait 3 or 4 months here.
I'm thinking we can get this resolved quickly and have another meeting.
If we could just have a meeting with the attorney,
Yeah.
we can come back to you and give you some solid numbers. I don't think there's any discussion amongst the 3 of us with this line item of the Assistant Director 911 wages for the position. Get mine cleared up. I'm willing to be flexible, but I'm not, when we work the hours we work because of the type of work we do, I can't be hiring someone to go backwards.
Right.
And I'm willing to throw that olive branch out there because I'd like to see this resolved just because of the internal strife it tends to cause.
Yep.
With me being the focus of
I think
this.
if the 4 of us have a conference call, legal counsel, we can get this resolved. And it's not uncommon a lot of times to get different viewpoints from different attorneys. And that happens occasionally, and then we ask them to clarify that, because there has been other times. So this is not a confrontational thing. I think we should have a conference call, have the 4 of us there.
We can do it
ask-
relatively quickly.
Ask these questions and come back to you, whenever your next meeting is, so.
Okay.
But I think, the positive thing is I think all 4 of us in agreement that these positions should be salaried for
I think so.
numerous reasons, right? Is that a fair statement? We're all recommending that. And I think there seems to be support here. It's just a matter of how we do it and what.
How we can get there.
Right?
Yep. I think so.
I support it, but I'm worried that we're going to create another
Well,
problem.
definitely.
I'd like not to do these in isolation of looking at.
Well, let's get this issue at least cleared up and kind of go from there. If you want us, we can get a quote on what it would be to do a full-blown wage scale.
I wanted to.
I mean, it's up, in the past, the board has not wanted to do that.
I don't think we need a full-blown, but I think we need a discussion of each one and maybe a comparison of, I think there are a couple that may be out of line.
And I think we're all in agreement there. So let's take the next step, and I'll set a conference call with the 4 of us, who are legal counsel, get this resolved. we can continue with the agenda, because I know some of you have
Yep.
commitments here.
Yep.
And it's almost noon already,
Yeah. so
and the
can I
judge
just
is
move on?
waiting, and Joe's, well, the judge is gone, but Joe is here. So maybe we can
Okay.
move on and set a next meeting date, and then we can, I think it's a good dialogue that we're having here. This is not a confrontational thing, we just want to get this resolved and do it, because what are we going to do? We want to make sure that we do it right. I think, I understand the logic, but I think what you did this summer for one individual, as an individual, kind of has set a bad precedent. So we're trying to look at the positions, not at the individuals. In terms of like the secretaries with the Teamsters, you can argue, yeah, someone's been here X years, they should be making more, but you can also argue that no one took a pay cut. Some got a major raise, and you pay for the position, not the person in the position.
Yep.
And that's always a very
Yep,
emotional
I
thing.
saw that coming. As I said, I didn't support it for that reason. All right, so we're not going to look at the non-union pay scale?
Well,
today?
we just did,
That
kind
was,
of.
that was included in that
I mean,
one?
this is
Okay.
all part of the
Well,
discussion.
Is
yeah.
that combined? Okay.
And when you were started this, that this was not going to be a short-term discussion, that you as a committee are going to be busy
Okay.
this year.
Okay, so then we had a question on the probate family court data review.
Joe, want to come up? And they have a copy of it you gave me, Joe.
Signed.
And as you all know, Mr. Polo's leaving us shortly.
Oh.
So this is one of his last appearances probably here.
I think there's at least a couple more.
Yeah, a few appearances.
All right.
So we just basically wanted to be part of the discussion. We realize that you're just beginning this process and that there may be some, changes. I think you've probably had a chance to read some of our rationale, and a lot of it has to do with cost of living. And we realize there's cost of living increases, but sometimes those don't necessarily match the reality of the world we live in. And we're currently, dealing with a hiring issue with our deputy probate register, and under the current wages available and such, we've had 3 applicants. And as you would know, 3 applicants isn't a very good pool to be able to necessarily find somebody, especially qualified, doing the detailed type of work that a deputy probate register does. So, bottom line, I think we just want to be part of the discussion and be able to look at and consider some of the wages of all the different positions that our office has. I'm not suggesting anything in terms of changes from hourly to salaried positions or anything like that. Most of our positions still have the availability of overtime if needed, and the type of crisis work that we do, that does happen. And so we're not trying to become salaried instead of hourly. But that's about it. If you have any questions, we'd like to be part of the discussion and talk more about it.
All right, well, hopefully you'll get some, yes, Ty, go ahead.
Yeah, certainly, when we look at the others, we look at this, because there's I'm looking at it, and I don't know what they do, but there's no comparison between some of the hourly rates down here and some that are outside of the court. So I'd like to have us include this in our discussion when we look at the other ones.
What are you comparing, Ty? You're talking about
I was looking at the
our non-union
Yeah.
wage scale? Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I mean, our deputy registrar hire ought to make at least as much as the people in the back of the McDonald's.
Well, McDonald's doesn't have the benefit package we have. We have to remember that, too.
But you still gotta live.
Well, the people are living on
Well, not
less,
at $15 an hour.
well, it's hard, but they're making it at 20 and without our benefit package, I guess is my
Well,
point.
that gets into the whole Alice business. A lot of people are employed, but they're not making a living wage.
Right.
Well, they're surviving. A lot of our citizens are just surviving.
Ride a week with me and I'll show you.
I know.
I bet.
I don't know, people live in it, so I get it.
Joe, are
All
they 35-hour employees too?
Pardon?
35-hour, or are they 40?
Most are 35, probation officers are 37 and a half.
And then do you fall in on the one extra holiday like district court or no? Do you follow district court or you get extra holiday that our employees don't get?
You get one extra holiday
One.
on New Year's Eve day.
Okay, I knew there was something, okay.
Sorry, we are interviewing for a new staff person, so I had to go up and participate in that, so, sorry. So where are we in the?
Just asking, answering some questions.
Okay.
Any other questions about Joe's position? Ty just made the comment that if we are going to look at it too, we should be also looking at the core employees at the same time. It's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, for sure. When I knew this was happening, when I started looking at what our pay scale was, and I saw that it didn't necessarily match up with the Teamsters, which, that's okay, but, some of the starting, hourly wages, Joe probably went, are pretty low in terms of other jobs in the area. McDonald's, $21 an hour. I'm not sure I want to work at McDonald's for 35 hours a week, but to bring someone on when they look at the pay scale, it's a hard sell, even though benefits and this and that. So there are perks, but when you multiply it out, so we're interviewing now for our part-time deputy register, a probate deputy probate clerk. It's a 4-day a week, but even if it was a 5-day, averaging it out, if you have children, looking at the poverty scale, it kind of hovers at you're earning, but you don't have a whole lot of extra. So I think it's I'm pleased it's time to look at all the wages. Things have increased, and we want to be known as a county that takes care of our staff. Not to pay them everyone $85,000 a year. Can't do that. That wouldn't be appropriate. But it is time to look through the lens of what it costs to live, and when we interview now, people are coming in who are sometimes younger with children. So that's even a more difficult road to be in, as opposed to someone 55, 60, who maybe would stay 5-10 years, but they've kind of passed some of those other responsibilities and financial things that families have to do. So, when I was listening earlier, you folks have a lot of facts and figures to keep in your head. But as this goes forward, we're happy to come back and work with you, provide additional feedback, so that hopefully we can reach some kind of consensus as to what an appropriate future wage scale would be for our staff. And when you were talking about the turning things into salary, Mr. Pobolo, we didn't talk about that at all for our staff, and I'm not sure if that's even contemplated in our discussions, in your discussions or thought process, because we didn't look at it through that kind of lens at this point, at least.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Yep, we'll
Okay, take care.
for
Thank you.
consideration, so thank you for that.
So you're saying Joe needs to stay here until we resolve all these cases?
Yes, I am saying that.
It's what we
That would be
gather.
logical.
So you have until June 13th.
I think we'll have it done by 2023.
Yeah.
He's
Hang in
got
there.
full of Tom Brady.
But Tom's gonna switch teams, isn't he?
Yeah.
All right. So do we want to, you have some personnel updates?
No, I just put it in there in case there's anything else you want to talk
Okay.
about. I
You don't have
copied it just
anything for
as a
us?
generic
Okay.
item, that if there's other positions you want to bring up, I just put that there to give us that flexibility.
No one has anything else on that topic? Other topics, we're going to need costs for any changes as we go, and before we make the recommendation, we're gonna need those numbers for the full board of commissioners. I mean, we could easily, I can see where we can easily end up with an extra $100,000 a year, you know, which means that next year you're not only gonna have that $100,000 extra, it's gonna be multiplied by probably the average of 3, or what's next year going to be for raises for our employees. We have to just, so we're gonna need, you know, actual hard costs. Now, but I would expect though, if we do this, some overtime budgets would be eliminated. So we'll say, have some money savings there. Is that a fair statement, Jen?
On moving to salary?
Yes.
I think that'd be the clerk would have to, she's the only, Jen used, I think 6 or 8 hours of her overtime last year, but you'd have to, get your recommendation from the clerk, because you're in an election.
I guess it would just depends where you put those salaries at.
Well, but we strike an agreement with clerk and et cetera, that might be something a little bit different, but as we move forward, we shouldn't have overtime.
Typically, when it falls under something that's out of the ordinary, you know, she has informed you. So for instance, there was a jury trial this week. We haven't had a jury trial since February of 2020.
Right.
There are 2 scheduled that are kind of not coming off in April. So each time the staff is coming for 8, leaving at 6, you know, so, and then this is an election year. So she may be able to project what she could, you know, take from the overtime hours by making it salaried. But if she's not here, then the chief is for those types of events.
Okay, very good. All right. Next meeting date, it sounds like we should probably meet again.
Next week's spring break coming up, so that's.
Yeah, let's move into April.
Some people are going to Florida. Probably
Some
April.
people.
Yeah, some people. Who aren't tan already.
Yeah, or who have already been there. So
For some reason, you mentioned the 19th. That's your regular meeting, all right?
That's the
We're having an
special.
ARPA meeting at 3 o'clock.
Okay. So the ARPA meeting is where you want this reserves to come to?
If you could just give an update to the full
Like I did
board
today?
and talk about how much we have committed on ARPA funds already, like we talked about. That's April 19th. So
Okay,
I'm sure you'll be fully tan by then.
absolutely.
And give us an advanced organizer for the millage rate discussion.
Yeah, okay. We can.
That'd be a good time to do that, I
Yeah,
suspect.
we'll open. Okay, so, do we want to try to pick an April date to meet, or do you want Chet to get with us and,
There's only 3 of you, maybe we can pick a date.
yeah,
3 is a little hard, easier than 7 people try to agree on a date.
got a little time, you're going to want to work some numbers. Do you want to look at, like, say, the 20th or 21st of April, a Wednesday or Thursday?
21st doesn't work for me because of community mental health, 20th does.
April 20th?
What do you think, Rick? April 20th?
Yeah, make it. What day is that?
That'd be a Wednesday, I believe, right?
Yeah, it's a
No, I can
Wednesday.
make it.
And are you still going through therapy?
What, physical or mental?
Physical therapy. Because I think we did at 10 because you had some, you want to keep at 10 or you want
No, I'm-
to afternoon or?
So I can have whatever.
You're probably the tightest with schedule.
Is Bruce gonna let you?
One second, I'm trying to figure out a date. Are you working? Well, I must have given her those dates. 20th.
What time, Rick? You're both flexible on the 20th? Why don't you just get back, once you find out, because I know you got,
Well, we have a
Grandkids
special
come
meeting
in.
on the 19th.
yeah, that's at 3.
So, and that's at 3, but probably if we do it like 10 o'clock.
Well, let's
set
shoot
it-
for
let's-
10 unless you have a conflict,
Yep,
okay?
I'll just set it in there and,
So we'll go April 20th at 10 a.m. And if for some reason that doesn't work, let me know and we can change it, okay?
okay. Might
And that works, Ty and Rick?
Is it might be,
Take it off now, I'm at 16 something.
okay.
I did rough.
All right, we'll figure it out.
16 something hour.
Okay, is there,
78, weird.
Any other discussion items? I think we've covered it. Any other board member comments? Any other board member? I hear none. Public comment? We should add this to.
Jim Kiesel, the undersheriff again. One thing that's just came up, I would like you guys to ask, when you get this legal opinion, you were presented with one today, and I believe that was specific to the clerk. And I don't know for certain, but I would find it hard to believe that there would be a specific set of rules for the clerk's office and not for other elected officials' offices. And those pay scales, like myself, and obviously in the Register of Deeds, I mean, I was put in at the one-year pay scale, not at the top. So I would find it hard to believe that the legal opinion would apply only to the clerk's office and not these other offices of elected officials. So I would ask that legal opinion not be specific to one office, but for all of them, which would give you a broad set of rules for sorting this out in the future.
And that was my intention at least.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? One quick question. Ty, you said the 21st didn't work, but because you have community mental health.
Right.
Can you work one half of the day?
It's in Cadillac, and there's 3 meetings.
So it pretty much takes your whole day. All right, well, we'll figure it out then. Okay, well then, we are adjourned.